My name is Marcus Reed, and the text came through at exactly 2:15 in the morning. I know because I'd been staring at the ceiling for 3 hours already, counting water stains and wondering how I'd managed to lose everything in the span of 6 months. The phone lit up the dark room like a flare, and when I saw her name, something in my chest went tight. Found someone better. You're pathetic. 8 words. That's all it took. 8 words from the woman I'd spent 4 years building a life with, the woman who'd walked out when the company started struggling, the woman who told me I wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't driven enough, wasn't enough. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I sat up in bed, read it 3 more times, and felt that familiar burn start in my throat. The kind that comes right before you either break something or break down. I did neither. Instead, I typed back 5 words that I didn't fully understand yet but knew were true. Congrats on marrying my employee. Then I turned off the phone and lay back down. Sleep didn't come, but something else did. Clarity, maybe. Or just exhaustion so deep it looked like peace. 6 months earlier, my life looked different. I had a small tech consulting firm in Austin, nothing flashy, but solid. We specialized in data security for mid-sized businesses, the kind of unglamorous work that kept companies running but never made headlines. I had 12 employees, a decent office space in a converted warehouse near the river, and a girlfriend who seemed happy enough when things were good. Her name was Vanessa. Dark hair, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and immediately assess who mattered and who didn't. I thought that made her smart. Turns out it just made her calculating. The trouble started when our biggest client, a regional banking chain, got acquired by a national corporation. They brought in their own security team, and just like that, 40% of our revenue vanished overnight. I remember the day I got the call. I was sitting at my desk, going over quarterly projections that suddenly meant nothing. Vanessa was supposed to meet me for lunch that day. She canceled via text. Said she had a headache. Looking back, I think that was the first crack, the moment she started measuring the distance between where I was and where she wanted to be. I didn't panic right away. You don't build a business from nothing without learning how to adapt. I started reaching out to contacts, pitching new services, even considered pivoting into software development. My team was good, loyal, willing to take temporary pay cuts while we figured things out. All except one. His name was Dylan Kershaw. 28 years old, smooth talker, expensive watch he definitely couldn't afford on his salary. I'd hired him 8 months prior because he had connections in the commercial real estate sector, and I thought that might open new doors for us. He was decent at his job, nothing exceptional, but he had this way of making himself seem more important than he was. Always the first to speak in meetings, always dropping names of people he'd allegedly worked with, always positioning himself as the expert even when he was reading from someone else's research. Vanessa liked him. She'd mention him sometimes after company events, say things like, "Dylan really knows how to network," or "You could learn something from how he presents himself." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too busy trying to keep the business alive. The breakup happened on a Thursday. I'd just gotten home from a meeting with a potential client that went nowhere. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Vanessa's shoes weren't by the door. Her jacket wasn't on the hook. I walked into the bedroom and found her suitcase open on the bed, half-packed. She was folding a sweater, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd already made up her mind hours ago, maybe days. "What's going on?" I asked, even though I already knew. She didn't stop folding. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus." "Do what?" "This." She gestured vaguely around the room, like our entire relationship was just the furniture and paint color. "You're drowning, and I'm not going down with you." I stood there, key still in my hand, trying to process what was happening. The business is going through a rough patch. That doesn't mean it's not just the business. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were cold, distant, like she was already somewhere else. "You're comfortable with mediocrity." You always have been. You're fine with small wins and participation trophies. I need someone who actually wants to build something that matters. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were particularly cruel, but because she said them with such certainty, like she'd been thinking about this for months and had finally found the vocabulary to express her disappointment. I've been working 80-hour weeks trying to save this company, I said quietly. How is that mediocrity? You're working hard at the wrong things. You're trying to save something that's already dying instead of having the vision to start something new. She zipped the suitcase. I can't wait around for you to figure out ambition. She left that night. Didn't take everything, just enough to make the apartment feel hollow. I sat on the couch until 3 a.m, staring at the spot where her plants used to sit on the windowsill, wondering how someone could live with you for 4 years and still see you as fundamentally insufficient. The next few weeks were mechanical. I went to the office, managed projects, had one-on-one meetings with employees who were clearly worried about their jobs but too polite to say it directly. I reassured them even though I wasn't sure I believed my own reassurances. Revenue kept dropping. 2 more clients shifted to larger firms. I had to let go of 3 people, which meant the remaining 9 had to pick up the slack. The office that used to hum with energy started to feel like a waiting room, everyone just hoping to hear good news that never came. Dylan stayed, which surprised me at first. I would have expected him to jump ship to a more stable company, but he seemed committed. He even volunteered to take on extra responsibilities, said he wanted to help turn things around. I appreciated it. Or at least I thought I did. It was Sarah, my operations manager, who first mentioned something odd. She came into my office one afternoon, closed the door behind her, and sat down with that expression people have when they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. I need to talk to you about Dylan, she said. I looked up from the financial reports I'd been staring at for the past hour. What about him? He's been meeting with clients. Our clients. Without logging it in the system. I frowned. Maybe he's just being proactive, trying to strengthen relationships. Sarah shook her head. Marcus, he's been taking them to lunch, sending follow-up emails from his personal account, not the company one. And yesterday I overheard him on the phone talking about transitioning services and new partnership opportunities. He shut up the second he saw me. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. You think he's poaching? I think he's setting something up. And I think you should look into it before it's too late. I wanted to dismiss it. Dylan had been nothing but supportive since Vanessa left. He even sent me a text one night saying he respected how I was handling everything, that most people would have folded by now. But Sarah wasn't the type to make accusations without reason. She'd been with me since the beginning, had turned down higher-paying jobs to stay because she believed in what we were building. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I accessed Dylan's work email through the admin portal. Technically legal since it was a company account, but it still felt like a violation. What I found made my hands go cold. Dozens of emails to our clients. Polite, professional, subtly undermining. Phrases like, given the company's current instability and I want to make sure you have continuity of service regardless of what happens, and I'm exploring options that might better serve your needs. He was laying groundwork, carefully, methodically, positioning himself as the stable alternative while I was the sinking ship. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the email chain with Vanessa. It went back 5 months. Long before she left. Long before I even knew there was a problem. The early emails were professional. She'd reached out asking about potential freelance opportunities, said she was considering a career shift into marketing for tech companies. He offered to meet for coffee to discuss the industry. Innocent enough. But then the tone changed. The meetings became more frequent. The language became more casual. And then, about 3 months before she left me, the emails turned into something else entirely. You deserve someone who matches your ambition. Marcus is a good guy, but he's never going to be more than what he is right now. I've been thinking about what you said. About starting fresh. I sat there reading message after message, watching my relationship disintegrate in archived text, seeing how carefully they'd both convinced themselves this wasn't betrayal, it was just practical evolution. Two ambitious people recognizing they were better aligned with each other than with the dead weight holding them back. The final email was dated 2 days before Vanessa packed her suitcase. Dylan had sent her a link to an apartment listing. A place downtown, expensive, way beyond what either of them should have been able to afford individually. The subject line was simple. Our next chapter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark of my office for a long time. The building was empty. Everyone had gone home hours ago. The city lights filtered through the windows, casting everything in that orange sodium glow that makes the world look both beautiful and poisonous at the same time. I thought about confronting them. Thought about the satisfaction of walking into the office the next morning and firing Dylan in front of everyone, making sure they all knew what he'd done. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that revenge wouldn't change anything. Or maybe it was something else, some instinct I didn't fully understand yet. Instead, I started digging deeper. If Dylan was planning to leave and take clients with him, he had to be setting up a new company. That meant business filings, LLC registrations, maybe trademark applications. I spent the next 3 nights searching public records, cross-referencing names and addresses, following digital breadcrumbs. And I found it. Kershaw Solutions, LLC. Filed 6 weeks ago. Registered agent, Dylan Kershaw. Business address, a co-working space in the same building where Vanessa's new apartment was located. Services offered, data security consulting for small to mid-sized businesses. Exact same niche as my company. He hadn't left yet because he was still building his client list. Still using my resources, my office, my infrastructure to set up his own empire. And Vanessa was helping him. She'd listed herself as the marketing director on the preliminary website that wasn't live yet but was cached in search engines if you knew where to look. I should have been angry. I was angry. But underneath that anger was something colder, sharper. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. They'd made a mistake. A big one. They'd assumed I was too defeated, too distracted, too mediocre to notice what they were doing. They'd underestimated me the same way Vanessa always had, mistaking quietness for weakness, patience for passivity. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not a big firm, just someone I'd worked with on contract reviews, a woman named Patricia Chen who had a reputation for being thorough and unflinching. I walked her through everything. The emails, the client meetings, the new company, all of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook that looked like it had survived several legal wars. When I finished, she looked up and said, "How much do you want to hurt him?" "I don't want to hurt him," I said. "I want to protect what's mine." She smiled, just slightly. "Then we need to move fast. And we need to be smart about this." Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia helped me build a case. We documented every client Dylan had contacted. We pulled phone records showing dozens of calls to our clients from his personal cell during work hours. We found the non-compete and non-solicitation agreement he'd signed when I hired him, the one that explicitly prohibited him from starting a competing business or recruiting our clients for 2 years after leaving the company. He'd either forgotten about it or assumed I wouldn't enforce it. Either way, it was ironclad. But Patricia suggested something else, something I hadn't considered. "Don't fire him yet," she said during one of our meetings. "Let him think he's getting away with it. Let him keep building his client list, keep making promises. The more he commits to this venture, the harder it'll be for him to walk away when we pull the rug out. Won't that give him more time to steal clients? He's not stealing them yet. He's courting them. Big difference. Right now, he's making promises about what he can offer when he leaves. But he hasn't left. And he hasn't delivered anything. If we move now, we document everything, then we wait for him to make his move. When he does, We hit him with a cease and desist so fast he won't know what happened. And we make sure every single client he contacted knows exactly why we're taking legal action. It was risky. But it was also strategic. And after months of feeling like I was just reacting to disaster after disaster, it felt good to be the one planning the next move. Dylan didn't suspect anything. He came into work every day, charming as ever, offering suggestions in meetings, staying late to help out while secretly using our conference room to take calls with his future clients. I watched him carefully, noticed things I'd missed before. The way he'd check his phone constantly during meetings. The way he'd volunteer to handle client communications so he could control the narrative. The way he'd subtly trash-talk the company's stability to newer employees, planting seeds of doubt so they'd be more likely to follow him when he eventually left. Vanessa texted me twice during those 2 weeks. Once to ask about splitting some furniture we'd bought together, once to ask if I could send her mail that was still being delivered to the apartment. Both messages were cold, transactional, devoid of any acknowledgement that we'd once meant something to each other. I responded with single-word answers and felt nothing. Whatever love I'd had for her had been replaced by something else. Not quite hate. More like the emotional equivalent of scar tissue. Hard, numb, protective. Then, 3 weeks after I'd started documenting everything, Dylan came into my office and closed the door. He had that expression people wear when they're about to deliver news they think will devastate you but they're secretly excited about. The kind of false sympathy that barely conceals smugness. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something," he said, sitting down without being invited. "What's up?" He sighed, theatrically. "This isn't easy to say, but I've decided to move on. I've really valued my time here, learned a lot, but I think it's time for me to explore other opportunities." I kept my face neutral. "Other opportunities?" "Yeah, I've been doing some thinking about my career path, and I feel like I need to take a leap, you know? Try something entrepreneurial. Starting your own company?" He nodded, trying to look humble and failing. "I know the timing isn't great with everything that's been going on here, but I have to think about my future." "When are you planning to leave?" "I was thinking end of the month. Gives you time to transition my projects." 2 weeks. He was giving me 2 weeks, probably because he'd already lined up enough clients to make his departure viable. He thought he was being generous. Thought he was the bigger man for not just walking out immediately. "I appreciate you being upfront about it," I said, and I meant it in a way he didn't understand. He stood up, extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, confident. The grip of someone who thinks they've won. "No hard feelings?" he asked. "None at all." After he left, I called Patricia. "He just gave notice." 2 weeks. "Perfect," she said. "Let him leave. Let him think he's free. Then we move." Those 2 weeks were surreal. Dylan walked around the office like a man who'd already mentally checked out but was graciously blessing us with his presence. He made a big show of organizing his files, sending long explanatory emails about his projects, positioning himself as the responsible professional making a clean exit. Some of the other employees seemed genuinely sad to see him go. Sarah knew better. She'd catch my eye across the room sometimes and just shake her head slightly, like she was watching a performance we both knew was fiction. On Dylan's last day, the team took him out for drinks. I didn't go. Said I had a meeting with a potential investor, which was half true. I did have a meeting, just not with an investor. Patricia had arranged for us to meet with 3 of the clients Dylan had been courting, the ones whose contracts with us were most vulnerable. We laid out everything. Showed them the emails, explained the non-compete situation, made it clear that any agreement they'd made with Dylan was legally problematic and potentially actionable. 2 of them backed out immediately, horrified that they'd almost gotten caught in the middle of a legal mess. The third, a guy who owned a chain of dental offices, was more hesitant. "Dylan said you were going under," he told me. "Said you'd probably have to shut down within 6 months and he was just trying to make sure we had continuity of service." "Did he show you our financials?" I asked. Well, no, but we're not going under. We're rebuilding. And we're doing it with integrity, not by poaching clients and violating contracts. I slid a folder across the table. This is our plan for the next 18 months. New services, expanded team, partnerships we're forming with 2 larger firms to handle overflow. Dylan didn't know about any of this because he stopped being part of the team the moment he decided to compete with us. The dentist read through the documents slowly. When he looked up, his expression had shifted. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot. Dylan's good at making people believe him. But facts are facts. And the fact is, he lied to you. We kept the client. All 3 of them, actually. And word spread. Small business community in Austin is tighter than people realize. By the end of the week, 4 other companies Dylan had approached called me directly to ask what was going on. I told them the truth. Didn't embellish, didn't play victim, just laid out the timeline and let them draw their own conclusions. Dylan's company launched anyway. He couldn't back out at that point, had already signed a lease on office space, already made promises to Vanessa, already burned the bridge behind him. His website went live on a Monday morning. Professional design, stock photos of diverse people in business casual pointing at laptops, all the usual corporate nonsense. Under the About Us section, there was a photo of Dylan looking thoughtful in front of a whiteboard covered in incomprehensible diagrams, and below that, a paragraph about his years of industry leadership and commitment to client success. Vanessa was listed as Director of Strategic Growth. Her photo showed her in a blazer I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, smiling like she'd found her purpose. The cease and desist letter arrived at Dylan's new office that same afternoon. Patricia had timed it perfectly. In it, we detailed every violation of his non-compete agreement, every client he'd solicited while still employed by my company, every meeting he'd taken using our resources to build his competing business. We weren't asking for damages yet. We were simply demanding that he immediately stop soliciting our clients and cease using any proprietary information or methods he'd learned while working for us. We gave him 72 hours to respond. He called me 6 hours later. I was in my car, driving home from the office, when his name lit up my phone. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Marcus, what the hell is this? His voice was tight, strained, none of the smooth confidence from before. It's a legal letter. I assume you can read. This is insane. You can't actually enforce a non-compete in Texas. Everyone knows that. You're right that Texas law is generally hostile to non-competes, I said calmly. But there are exceptions. Especially when the agreement is tied to confidential information and trade secrets. Especially when the employee used company resources to build a competing business while still on the payroll. Patricia's pretty confident a judge will see it our way. Silence on the other end. Then, quieter, this isn't personal, Marcus. It's just business. You're right. It isn't personal. That's why I'm handling it through lawyers instead of putting you in the hospital. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and anger mixing into something electric. But underneath that was something else. Something that felt uncomfortably close to satisfaction. Vanessa called 20 minutes later. I was home by then, standing in the kitchen making dinner I wouldn't eat. I answered on the first ring this time. Are you seriously doing this? She demanded. No hello, no preamble, just immediate accusation. Doing what? Trying to destroy Dylan's company before it even starts. This is pathetic, Marcus. Even for you. I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. He violated a contract. I'm enforcing it. That's not pathetic. That's business. He's trying to build something. Why can't you just let him go? He's trying to build something using my clients and my methods and information he learned while working for me. If he wants to start a company, he can do it legitimately. This isn't about letting him go. This is about him following the rules he agreed to. You're just bitter because he's actually ambitious. Because he's not afraid to take risks. The laugh that came out of me was harsh, unexpected. Is that what he told you? That he's ambitious? Vanessa, he's a thief. He stole from me while pretending to be loyal. That's not ambition. That's just fraud with better marketing. You don't know what you're talking about. I have emails. I have phone records. I have documented evidence of every client he contacted, every lie he told. Patricia says it's the most clear-cut case she's seen in years. So yeah, I think I know what I'm talking about. She went quiet. In the background, I could hear Dylan's voice, muffled, asking what I was saying. Then she came back on the line, her voice colder now. You're pathetic. You always have been. You're dragging Dylan down because you can't stand seeing someone else succeed. He's not succeeding. He's failing in advance. He just doesn't know it yet. We'll see about that. She hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, and felt the weight of the last 6 months settle on my shoulders. The company I'd built was damaged but not dead. The woman I'd loved was gone and I didn't miss her. And the employee who'd betrayed me was about to learn that contracts actually mean something. It wasn't the life I'd imagined 6 months ago. But it was mine. And for the first time since that client contract fell through, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. The next 72 hours moved slowly. Patricia filed the preliminary injunction request, which meant a judge would decide whether to immediately prohibit Dylan from contacting our clients while the case moved forward. Dylan hired his own lawyer, some guy who apparently specialized in employment disputes. They filed a response claiming the non-compete was overly broad and unenforceable, that Dylan had every right to work in his chosen field, that I was using legal intimidation to stifle competition. Standard playbook. Patricia had expected it. They'll try to make this about your ego, she told me during a call. They'll say you're a bitter ex-boss who can't handle someone leaving. Don't engage with that narrative. Stay focused on the facts. He signed a contract. He violated it. End of story. The hearing was set for the following Wednesday. In the meantime, my actual business still needed running. We'd picked up 2 new clients in the past 3 weeks, small accounts but growing. Sarah had been instrumental in landing them, using her network to spread word that we were stabilizing. The remaining employees seemed more energized now that Dylan was gone, like his departure had released some pressure valve nobody knew was stuck. We had staff meetings where people actually contributed ideas instead of just nodding along. The office started to feel less like a funeral home and more like a workspace again. I found myself working late most nights, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something clarifying about the solitude, about sitting at my desk with the city lights spread out below and just building. Fixing code. Designing systems. Solving problems. The things I'd always been good at, the things that got lost in the noise of managing personalities and relationship drama and trying to be someone I wasn't. On Tuesday night, the evening before the hearing, I got a text from an unknown number. Marcus, it's Vanessa. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed back, talk to my lawyer. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, please. This is important. Against my better judgment, I called her. She answered immediately. Thank you for calling, she said, and her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. What do you want, Vanessa? I need you to drop the lawsuit. No. Marcus, please. You're going to ruin him. His investors are pulling out. His lease is in jeopardy. If you go through with this, he'll have nothing. He should have thought about that before he violated his contract. He made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. This was months of planning and lying and using my resources to compete with me. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy that backfired. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softer, what do you want? Money? We can pay you back for whatever you think he owes. I don't want your money. Then what? What will it take for you to walk away? I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the city. I want him to admit what he did. In writing. A full accounting of every client he contacted, every meeting he took, every lie he told. And I want him to formally acknowledge that he violated his non-compete. If he does that, I'll consider settling for an agreement that he won't compete in Texas for 2 years and won't contact any of our existing clients. Ever. That's ridiculous. That would destroy his company. His company is already destroyed. This just makes it official. You're being cruel. I'm being fair. He had a choice at every step. He chose wrong. I thought you were better than this. That almost made me laugh. You spent 4 years telling me I wasn't good enough. That I wasn't ambitious enough, driven enough. Now you're mad because I'm finally showing some backbone? You can't have it both ways, Vanessa. She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was brittle. I hope you feel good about yourself. I don't feel good. I feel exhausted. But I feel right. And that's enough. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in the quiet of my office, phone dark on the desk, and realized I meant what I'd said. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like I'd finally stopped letting other people define what I was supposed to accept. The hearing the next day was brief. Dylan showed up in a suit that was too nice for his current financial situation, probably bought when he still thought his new company would work out. His lawyer made the expected arguments about overly restrictive non-competes and the right to earn a living. Patricia countered with the evidence we'd gathered, the emails, the client contacts, the timeline of his company formation. The judge, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every employment dispute excuse ever invented, listened without expression. Then she asked Dylan directly, "Did you sign this non-compete agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor, but, did you contact clients of your former employer while still employed there?" Dylan glanced at his lawyer. "I had some conversations, yes, but they were informal. Did you use company resources, including office space, phones, and email, to conduct these conversations?" Silence. Then, quietly, "Some of them." The judge nodded. "Preliminary injunction granted. Mr. Kershaw, you are prohibited from soliciting any clients of Reed Consulting for the duration of this case. You are also prohibited from using any proprietary methods or information obtained during your employment there. Violation of this order will result in contempt charges. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing." She banged the gavel. Dylan's face went pale. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something. Vanessa, who'd been sitting in the back of the courtroom, got up and walked out without looking at either of us. Patricia gathered her files. "That went well," she said simply. Outside the courthouse, Dylan caught up with me on the steps. "Marcus, wait." I stopped, turned. He looked smaller somehow, like the suit he was wearing was for someone else. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have done this differently. I just thought, you thought I was weak enough that you could get away with it." He didn't deny it. "I thought the company was dying anyway. I thought I was just being practical. The company wasn't dying. I was fixing it. You just didn't stick around long enough to see. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that loyalty means something. And I want you to leave me alone." I walked away before he could respond. Got in my car, drove back to the office, and got back to work. Because that's what you do. You don't stop because someone betrayed you. You don't give up because things got hard. You adapt. You build. You keep going. 3 weeks later, Dylan's company quietly dissolved. The website went dark. The office lease was terminated. The whole thing just evaporated like it had never existed. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to Denver, taken a job with a larger firm doing mid-level security work. Vanessa apparently went with him. I felt nothing when I heard that. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a distant acknowledgement that some chapters close without ceremony. My company stabilized. We landed a major contract with a hospital network that needed infrastructure overhaul. The revenue from that single deal was more than what we'd lost when the banking chain pulled out. I hired 4 new people, including 2 who'd previously worked for competitors and brought their own client relationships. Sarah got promoted to VP of Operations, which she deserved 5 times over. The office started to feel alive again. And me? I started sleeping through the night. Started cooking actual meals instead of surviving on coffee and takeout. Started going to the gym in the mornings before work, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because it felt good to be strong. I dated a little, nothing serious, just remembered what it was like to have conversations with people who didn't see me as a project to fix or a resource to exploit. 6 months after the hearing, I was working late again, going through proposals for expanding into cybersecurity training, when my phone buzzed. A text from that same unknown number Vanessa had used before. This time the message was different. Found someone better. You're pathetic. I read it twice. Felt that old familiar burn start in my chest, then fade just as quickly. I thought about all the ways I could respond. All the cutting things I could say. All the evidence I could marshal about how their relationship had started in betrayal and couldn't possibly be built on anything solid. Instead, I typed 5 words. The same 5 I'd sent that night 6 months ago when everything was falling apart and I didn't even know why they were true yet. Congrats on marrying my employee. Then I blocked the number, set down the phone, and went back to work. Because that's the thing about moving forward. You don't do it by looking back. You don't do it by seeking validation from people who never saw your worth in the first place. You do it by building something real. Something that doesn't crumble the first time the wind changes. Something that's yours. And that garage full of rust and regret my grandfather left? That workshop full of potential that nobody else could see? I never got that. What I got was something better. I got the knowledge that I could take betrayal and loss and the worst kind of personal devastation, and turn it into something stronger than what I had before. That's the inheritance that actually matters. Not what people give you. What you build from what they tried to take away. The months that followed the injunction should have felt like victory, but mostly they felt like cleanup. Legal battles don't end with a gavel strike. They drag on, accumulating paperwork and billable hours and sleepless nights spent reviewing depositions. Patricia kept me updated on every development, every motion Dylan's attorney filed, every attempt to paint me as a vindictive ex-employer crushing an innocent entrepreneur's dreams. The narrative they tried to spin was almost impressive in its dishonesty. According to their version of events, I was a failing business owner lashing out at a talented employee who'd simply recognized a sinking ship and tried to save himself. The truth had a harder time fitting into sound bites. Truth usually does. I focused on what I could control. The hospital network contract was complex, requiring us to overhaul their entire patient data security system while maintaining HIPAA compliance and integrating with legacy software that predated most of my employees. It was exactly the kind of challenge that made me remember why I'd started this company in the first place. Not for the money, though that helped. Not for prestige, because data security isn't glamorous. I'd started it because I liked solving puzzles that mattered, building systems that protected people's information, their privacy, their trust. We worked in phases. First, a comprehensive audit of their existing infrastructure. Then, documentation of every vulnerability, every outdated protocol, every point where a determined hacker could slip through. Finally, the rebuild. New firewalls, encrypted databases, multi-factor authentication systems, staff training modules. It took 4 months of 12-hour days, but when we finished, the hospital's CIO sent me an email that I printed out and put on my desk. This is the most thorough security overhaul we've ever implemented. You and your team should be incredibly proud. Sarah walked past my desk one afternoon and saw the printed email. You're keeping that? She asked, smiling. Reminding myself that good work speaks louder than good marketing, I said. She nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. Dylan had always been better at talking about work than doing it. He'd spend 30 minutes explaining a solution that would take him 10 minutes to implement, always making sure everyone knew how clever he was being. I'd mistaken that for confidence. Now I saw it for what it was: compensation for insecurity, volume filling the space where substance should have been. The lawsuit moved towards settlement in the 7th month. Dylan's lawyer reached out through Patricia with an offer. He would formally acknowledge the non-compete violation, agree not to operate any competing business in Texas for 3 years, and pay back the cost of company resources he'd used while planning his departure. In exchange, I would drop the civil suit and not pursue criminal charges for theft of trade secrets. What do you think? Patricia asked me during a call. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the settlement terms she'd emailed over. It was late, past midnight, and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic sounds filtering through the windows. Will this actually stop him from trying again? The non-compete is enforceable now. He violated the first one, got caught, and a judge issued an injunction. If he tries to break this one, he's looking at serious penalties. Plus, this will be public record. Any future employer or investor who does basic due diligence will find it. So his reputation takes the hit instead of his bank account. Essentially, yes. Though there's the resource reimbursement, so his bank account takes a small hit too. I thought about Vanessa's text. About the cruelty in those 8 words, the satisfaction she must have felt typing them out, imagining my reaction. I thought about Dylan's face in the courthouse, pale and small, realizing too late that consequences were real. And I thought about the version of myself from a year ago, the one who would have kept quiet about the broken vase, taken the blame for the wrecked bike, been the bigger man because that's what everyone expected. Accept the settlement, I said. But I want one additional term. He has to send a written apology to every client he contacted. Not a vague sorry for any confusion message. A real apology that explains what he did and acknowledges it was wrong. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's going to be hard for him. Good. He should have to look at what he did directly instead of hiding behind lawyer language. I'll propose it. They might push back. Then we go to trial. I'm not interested in letting him save face. They pushed back. Of course they did. Dylan's lawyer called it unnecessary public humiliation and argued it served no legitimate business purpose. Patricia responded that it served the very legitimate purpose of correcting false information Dylan had spread to our clients, and that if he was genuinely sorry, he should have no problem saying so. They went back and forth for 2 weeks before Dylan finally agreed. The apology letters went out on a Tuesday afternoon. I never saw them, but 3 clients forwarded me copies, saying they appreciated the transparency and wanted to continue working with us. One of them, the dental office owner who'd almost signed with Dylan, wrote back to me separately. I should have trusted my gut. When someone talks that much about someone else's failures, it usually means they're trying to hide their own. Thanks for handling this with class. I didn't feel particularly classy. I felt tired and relieved and ready to be done with the whole situation. The settlement was finalized the following week. Dylan signed everything, paid the reimbursement amount, and presumably went back to his life in Denver. I heard later, through the same grapevine that had told me about his move, that he and Vanessa had broken up within 3 months of relocating. Apparently the stress of the lawsuit and the failed business had exposed cracks in their relationship that they'd been too infatuated with each other to notice before. She moved back to Austin, took a job with a marketing firm downtown, and according to mutual acquaintances, spent a lot of time complaining about how I'd ruined her chance at happiness. I ran into her once, completely by accident, at a coffee shop near the office. I was picking up an order for the team. She was sitting at a corner table with her laptop, and our eyes met across the room. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she stood up and walked over. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was neutral, carefully controlled. "Vanessa." She looked different. Thinner, maybe, or just more worn down. The sharpness in her eyes had dulled into something closer to exhaustion. "I heard about the settlement." "Okay. Dylan said you made him apologize. That you humiliated him. I made him tell the truth. If that felt like humiliation, maybe he should examine why honesty embarrasses him. She flinched slightly. You really haven't changed. You're right. I haven't. I'm still the same person you called pathetic and mediocre. The same person you left because he wasn't ambitious enough. Turns out I was ambitious about different things. Things that last. Like what? Your company. The one that almost failed? Like integrity. Like building something that doesn't require stepping on people to succeed. Like being able to look at myself in the mirror without feeling sick. Her face hardened. You think you're so much better than us. No, I think I'm honest about who I am. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. I hope you're happy with your moral superiority. I'm happy with my choices. That's enough. She walked back to her table without another word. I picked up the coffee order and left. My hands were shaking slightly as I carried the tray back to the office, adrenaline mixing with something else. Not anger, exactly. More like the feeling you get after finally setting down something heavy you've been carrying for too long. Relief, tinged with the ache of strained muscles. Sarah noticed when I came back. You okay? You look like you saw a ghost. Something like that. Ran into Vanessa at the coffee place. Oh God. What happened? We talked. It was fine. It's over. She studied my face for a second, then nodded. Good. You deserve to be done with that chapter. The company kept growing. We hired 2 more developers, brought on a dedicated salesperson to pursue larger contracts, and started offering cybersecurity training workshops for small businesses. That last one was Sarah's idea, and it turned out to be surprisingly profitable. Turns out a lot of small business owners knew they needed better security but had no idea where to start. We'd spend half a day with them, assess their vulnerabilities, and give them a roadmap for improvement. Some became consulting clients, others just took the information and implemented it themselves. Either way felt good. I started sleeping better. Not perfectly, but better. The kind of sleep where you wake up and actually feel rested instead of just marginally less exhausted. I bought new furniture for the apartment, replaced the things that reminded me of Vanessa with things I actually liked. Turned the spare bedroom into a home office so I could work remotely when I needed to without sitting at the kitchen table. Small changes that added up to a life that felt more mine and less like something I was just occupying temporarily. 10 months after the settlement, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something made me pick up. Is this Marcus Reed? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. My name is Jennifer Okonkwo. I'm a venture capital partner with Frontier Growth Fund. I came across your company while researching the cybersecurity space in Texas, and I'm impressed with what I've seen. Would you be open to a conversation about potential investment? I sat up straighter in my chair. Investment? We're not really looking to. I understand you're not actively seeking funding. But we specialize in supporting companies that are solving real problems with practical solutions. Your hospital network contract caught our attention. The implementation was elegant, thorough, and ahead of industry standards. We think there's potential to scale that approach regionally, maybe nationally. I appreciate that, but I'm not interested in giving up control of the company. She laughed, warm and genuine. I wouldn't be either if I were in your position. This isn't about taking over. It's about providing resources for growth while you maintain operational control. But I understand if you're not interested. Would you at least be willing to meet for coffee? No pressure, just a conversation. I agreed to the meeting, partly out of curiosity, partly because her approach felt different from the usual venture capital pitch. We met the following week at a place downtown, one of those modern spots with exposed brick and artisan pastries. Jennifer was in her early 40s, sharp blazer, natural hair, presence that commanded attention without demanding it. She asked about the company's history, listened without interrupting, took notes in a leather journal that looked well used. When I finished, she said, "You've built something solid. But you're under-resourced. How many clients are you turning away because you don't have the capacity?" "We're not turning anyone away. We're just being selective. That's turning them away with better marketing." "How many contracts could you take on if you had 15 employees instead of 9? 20 instead of 15? I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. We're growing sustainably. I don't want to expand too fast and compromise quality." Smart. But there's a difference between sustainable growth and artificial limitation. You're limiting yourself based on current resources rather than potential demand. We could change that equation. She laid out a proposal. Frontier would invest capital for hiring, technology infrastructure, and marketing in exchange for a minority stake in the company. I'd maintain majority control and operational authority. They'd provide strategic guidance and connections to larger clients, but wouldn't interfere with day-to-day decisions. The terms were surprisingly reasonable, and the amount they were proposing would let us triple our capacity within a year. "Why us?" I asked. "You could invest in flashier companies. Startups with better growth projections. Because flashy usually means fragile. You've already weathered a crisis. You've already proven you can rebuild under pressure. That's worth more than a hockey stick growth chart that's mostly wishful thinking." She closed her journal. "Plus, your former employee's lawsuit actually made you look better. Anyone doing due diligence can see you protected your business against someone trying to steal it. That shows backbone." I thought about Dylan, about how his betrayal had nearly destroyed me but instead had forced me to become sharper, more strategic, more confident in defending what I'd built. Strange how the worst thing someone does to you can end up being the catalyst for becoming stronger. "I need to think about it," I said. "Talk to my team, review the terms with my lawyer. Take all the time you need. This offer stands for 60 days. I spent the next 2 weeks in constant analysis. Sarah was enthusiastic about the investment, seeing it as validation of the work we'd been doing. Patricia reviewed the legal documents and found them solid, minimal red flags. The rest of the team was cautiously optimistic, excited about the possibility of growth but nervous about outside influence. I shared those nerves. I'd spent so long fighting to maintain control of my own company that the idea of voluntarily giving up any piece of it felt uncomfortable. But I kept coming back to Jennifer's question. How many opportunities was I missing because I was so focused on protecting what I had that I couldn't see what I could become? I called her 3 weeks after our initial meeting. "I want to move forward, but I have some conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." We negotiated back and forth, adjusting terms, clarifying expectations, building in protections for both sides. The final agreement gave Frontier a 20% stake in exchange for substantial capital investment and strategic support. I maintained full operational control and right of first refusal on any future investment rounds. If they wanted out, I had the option to buy back their stake at a predetermined valuation. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. The money hit our account on a Thursday morning. I stared at the balance on my laptop screen for a full minute, not quite believing it was real. Sarah walked past my office and saw my expression. "We're funded?" she asked. I nodded, still staring at the screen. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half shout. "We're actually doing this. We're actually doing this." The next 6 months were controlled chaos. We hired 8 new people, moved to a bigger office space with actual conference rooms and a kitchen that wasn't just a microwave and a mini fridge, upgraded our technology infrastructure, and launched a proper marketing campaign. Jennifer checked in regularly but kept her distance operationally, offering advice when asked but never pushing. She introduced us to 3 potential clients, all of them larger companies that needed comprehensive security overhauls. We landed 2 of them. Revenue doubled, then tripled. We had to hire a dedicated HR person just to manage the growth. I promoted 2 of the original employees to team lead positions, brought in a CFO to handle the increasingly complex finances, and finally felt like the company had moved beyond survival mode into something that could actually thrive long-term. I started dating someone. Her name was Alexis. She worked as a physical therapist, and we met at a rock climbing gym I'd started going to on weekends. She knew nothing about tech, which was refreshing. Our conversations were about books and hiking trails and whether deep dish pizza counted as actual pizza or was just casserole with delusions of grandeur. She'd been through her own version of relationship disaster, an ex-fiancé who'd cheated with her best friend, so she understood the particular kind of betrayal that makes you question your own judgment. "Do you trust people now?" she asked me one night. We were sitting on her apartment balcony, drinking wine and watching the city lights. "Selectively," I said. "I trust people who've earned it. Who've shown up consistently. Who don't need me to fail for them to succeed." That's probably healthy. Probably cynical. Maybe cynical is just healthy with better boundaries. I thought about that for a while. About how much of my 20s I'd spent being the bigger man, absorbing other people's bad behavior, convincing myself that patience and understanding were the same as strength. About how Vanessa had called that mediocrity, when really it had just been conflict avoidance dressed up as virtue. "I think I'm still figuring out the difference between being kind and being a doormat," I admitted. Alexis smiled. "Join the club. Let me know when you figure it out." Things were good. Not perfect, because nothing ever is, but genuinely good in a way that felt sustainable rather than fragile. The company was stable, growing, profitable. My relationship with Alexis was easy in the best way, no drama, no games, just two people who liked each other figuring out how to build something together. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd let drift during the chaos of the previous year, started playing basketball on Saturday mornings, remembered what it felt like to have a life outside of work. Then, 13 months after that first text from Vanessa, I got another one. Different number this time, but I recognized the cadence immediately. "I made a mistake. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Felt that old familiar tightness in my chest, the reflex to respond, to engage, to try to fix something that had been broken by someone else. Then I thought about Alexis, about Sarah, about the team I'd built, about Jennifer's investment and the clients we'd won and the life I'd constructed from the wreckage of what I'd lost. I typed back, "No." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, "Please, Marcus. I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. I've made mine. Dylan and I broke up. I was wrong about everything. About him, about you, about what I wanted. That's unfortunate for you. It doesn't change anything for me. You're really not going to give me a chance to apologize?" I sat there with my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to write an essay, to lay out everything she'd put me through, every moment of doubt and pain and rebuilding. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly how much better my life was without her in it. But mostly I just wanted to be done. "Vanessa, I hope you figure out what you're looking for. But you're not going to find it with me. Take care of yourself." I blocked the number before she could respond. Set the phone down. Took a breath. Felt nothing except maybe mild irritation at the interruption. Alexis came out of the bedroom where she'd been reading. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. Just someone from the past trying to rewrite history." "You want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Want to watch something?" "Sure." We spent the evening on the couch watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures, her feet in my lap, the conversation about exes and betrayal already fading into background noise. That's when I knew I'd actually moved on. Not because I didn't care about what Vanessa had done, but because it had stopped being the defining narrative of my life. It was just something that had happened, something I'd survived and learned from and ultimately used to build something better. The company's second anniversary after the Dylan situation came and went without fanfare. We were too busy to throw a party, knee-deep in a project for a healthcare consortium that spanned 3 states. But Sarah brought in cupcakes one afternoon, gathered everyone in the main workspace, and made a short speech about how proud she was of what we'd built together. People applauded. Someone made a joke about the cupcakes being better than the ones we'd had at the old office. Everyone laughed. I stood there watching my team, these people who'd stuck with me through uncertainty and crisis, who'd believed in what we were doing even when the future was unclear, and felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter than that. Contentment, maybe. Or just the absence of the anxiety that had been my constant companion for so long. That night, I drove past the old office building where everything had fallen apart. The warehouse had been converted into luxury lofts, all glass and steel and rent I couldn't have afforded back then. I didn't feel nostalgic. Didn't feel much of anything except glad I wasn't there anymore. Sometimes the past is just the past, not a source of wisdom or regret, just a place you used to be. My phone buzzed at a red light. Jennifer, asking if I had time for a call tomorrow. She'd been talking about potential expansion into the Houston market, thought we were ready for a second office location. I texted back that I'd call her in the morning, then turned onto the highway toward home. The apartment was dark when I got there. Alexis had a key but wasn't staying over tonight, had an early shift at the clinic. I turned on the lights, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and stood at the window looking out at the city. Thought about everything that had led to this moment. The inheritance of nothing that turned into everything. The betrayal that forced me to learn how to fight. The loss that taught me what I actually valued. My grandfather's workshop full of hidden inventions didn't exist in my story. What I had instead was a business I had built twice, once in ignorance and once in full knowledge of how easily it could be taken away. The second version was better. Stronger. Mine in a way the first one never had been. I finished the beer, rinsed the bottle, and got ready for bed. Tomorrow there'd be client calls and team meetings and strategic planning sessions. There'd be problems to solve and decisions to make in the ongoing work of building something that mattered. But tonight, there was just this. The quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd survived the worst thing I thought could happen and come out the other side whole. Not because someone had left me a secret fortune or a hidden legacy. Because I'd chosen to stop waiting for validation from people who would never give it, and started building my own definition of success. That text from Vanessa, the one that had gutted me at 2:15 in the morning over a year ago, had been right about one thing. She had found someone better. Just not the way she'd meant it. Not someone better than me. Someone she thought was better, someone shinier and more ambitious and more aligned with whatever fantasy she'd constructed about what her life should look like. And I'd found something better too. Not a person, though Alexis was pretty great. I'd found the version of myself that didn't need to prove anything to anyone who'd already decided I wasn't enough. The version that could look at betrayal and see opportunity. The version that built things instead of just protecting them. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent now. No desperate texts. No attempts at manipulation disguised as apologies. Just quiet. I turned off the light and lay there in the dark, thinking about nothing in particular, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Sleep came easy. When I woke up 8 hours later, the sun was streaming through the windows and my phone was buzzing with messages from the team, ready to start another day of building something that would last. The Houston office opened 18 months after Jennifer's initial investment. We'd taken our time with it, hiring locally, building relationships with businesses in the area, making sure we had the infrastructure to support a second location before we committed. I flew down for the ribbon cutting, which wasn't an actual ribbon cutting because that felt too corporate for what we were. Instead, we had tacos and beer with the new team, talked about the projects we'd be working on, and I gave a short speech about building things that last. Sarah came with me for the trip. We stood outside the new office after everyone had left, looking at the sign with our company name on it, and she said something I hadn't expected. "You know what Dylan gave you? Permission to stop being nice." I looked at her. "What do you mean? You spent so long trying to be the reasonable one, the understanding one, the guy who didn't make waves. And then he forced you to fight back. To stop apologizing for taking up space. That's a gift, even if it came wrapped in garbage." I thought about that on the flight home. About how much energy I'd spent in my 20s trying to be palatable to people who would never appreciate it. How I'd confused accommodation with strength, silence with wisdom. Dylan and Vanessa hadn't just betrayed me. They'd shattered the comfortable fiction that being endlessly patient and understanding would somehow be rewarded. And in doing that, they'd accidentally set me free. The company hit 7 figures in annual revenue the following quarter. We celebrated at a nice restaurant, the whole team, everyone dressed up and laughing and telling stories about difficult clients and impossible deadlines we'd somehow met. I sat at the head of the table, watching these people who'd become more than just employees, who'd become collaborators and friends, and realized I'd built exactly the thing Vanessa said I never could. Something that mattered. Something that grew. Something that didn't require stepping on anyone to succeed. Alexis squeezed my hand under the table. "You're doing that thing where you disappear into your own head," she whispered. "Sorry. Just thinking. About how none of this would exist if everything hadn't fallen apart 2 years ago." She smiled. "That's the thing about falling apart. Sometimes it's the only way to figure out what you're actually made of." We'd been together for over a year by then, and she'd moved into my apartment 3 months prior. It was easy with her in a way nothing had ever been with Vanessa. No tests, no games, no constant evaluation of whether I was measuring up. Just 2 people building a life together, making decisions together, supporting each other's separate ambitions while creating shared ones. She wanted to open her own physical therapy practice eventually. I was helping her develop a business plan, introducing her to people who might be useful connections. It felt good to use what I'd learned to help someone else build something from scratch. The lawsuit with Dylan was long over, settled and filed away in legal archives where it would sit unless someone specifically went looking for it. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd gotten married, moved to Seattle, was working for a large tech firm doing security consulting. The news meant nothing to me. He'd become a character in a story I rarely told, relevant only as context for how I'd learned to protect what I built. Vanessa's attempts at reconnection had stopped after I blocked her number. I assumed she'd moved on, found some other relationship to invest her ambitions in, convinced herself that the failures of her past were always someone else's fault. I didn't think about her often. When I did, it was with the distant curiosity you might feel about a stranger's life, interest without investment. Then one afternoon, I was grabbing lunch at a place near the office when I saw her. She was sitting alone at a corner table, staring at her phone with an expression I recognized. The particular kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to hold together something that's already broken. She looked up, saw me, and for a second we just stared at each other across the restaurant. I could have walked out. Should have, probably. But something made me walk over to her table instead. "Vanessa. Marcus." She set down her phone. "I didn't expect to see you here. I work nearby. The new office is a few blocks over. I heard you expanded. Congratulations." "Thanks." I stood there awkwardly, not sure what the protocol was for running into your ex who'd once called you pathetic and then tried to crawl back. "How are you?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honestly, I've been better. Lost my job last month. The marketing firm downsized. And I'm going through a breakup that's making the one with Dylan look simple." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't want to gloat, but didn't want to pretend I was sorry either. "That's rough." "Yeah." She looked at me properly then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. "You look good." "Happy." "I am happy. I'm glad. I mean that." She took a breath. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the desperate texts I sent when Dylan and I imploded. What I did was cruel. The things I said were cruel. You didn't deserve any of it." "No, I didn't. I convinced myself you were the problem. That you weren't ambitious enough, weren't driven enough, weren't whatever enough. But the truth is, I was chasing some fantasy of what success was supposed to look like, and I couldn't see what was actually valuable. You were building something real. I was just collecting resume items. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Not because I forgave her, exactly, but because she seemed like she needed to say this and I was curious where it would go. I spent 2 years angry at you, I said. Angry at Dylan, angry at the whole situation. And then one day I realized the anger was just taking up space that could be used for something better. So I let it go. Not for you. For me. That's more grace than I deserve. Probably. But I didn't do it to be graceful. I did it to be free. We sat there for a moment in silence. The restaurant hummed with lunch rush conversations, the clatter of dishes, the espresso machine hissing steam. Normal life happening all around us while we sat in this strange pocket of past and present colliding. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said finally. Sure. That text you sent. About congratulations on marrying your employee. How did you know? I smiled despite myself. I didn't. Not when I sent it. I was just being petty. But I'd found evidence that you and Dylan were involved while we were still together, and the math wasn't hard. You left me for him. The marriage comment was just a guess based on how quickly you two moved in together. We did get engaged. Lasted about 6 months before we both realized we'd built the whole relationship on mutual resentment of other people. Turns out that's not a great foundation. No, it's not. I really am sorry, Marcus. For all of it. You deserved better. Yeah, I did. But I found it. So it worked out. She nodded slowly. I'm happy for you. I know that probably sounds hollow, but I mean it. I believe you. And weirdly, I did. Not because I thought we'd be friends or because this conversation erased what she'd done, but because I could see she was telling the truth. She'd learned the same lesson I had, just from the other side. That chasing some external definition of success while ignoring what actually matters leaves you empty. I stood up. I should get back to work. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. You too, Marcus. I walked out of the restaurant and didn't look back. Texted Alexis on the way to the office, ran into Vanessa. Weird but fine. Tell you about it later. She sent back a heart emoji and proud of you for handling it. That night, Alexis and I cooked dinner together in our kitchen, working around each other with the practiced ease of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. She told me about a patient who'd finally regained full mobility after months of therapy. I told her about the Vanessa encounter, the apology, the strange sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. Do you forgive her? Alexis asked, chopping vegetables while I stirred pasta sauce. I don't know if forgive is the right word. I've stopped caring enough to hold a grudge. That's different than forgiveness. Fair enough. Forgiveness is overrated anyway. Sometimes the best you can do is just stop letting someone take up rent in your head. We ate on the balcony, watching the city transition from day to night, and talked about plans for the weekend. Normal things. Grocery shopping and hiking and maybe catching a movie. The kind of unremarkable moments that actually make up a good life, the ones you don't notice until you've experienced the alternative. 3 years after that initial text, the company had grown to 40 employees across 2 locations. We'd added cloud security services, expanded into blockchain consulting, and picked up several major contracts with state government agencies. Jennifer's investment had multiplied in value, and she'd connected us with other portfolio companies for cross-referrals. Sarah was now COO with equity stake in the company. The original team members who'd stuck with me through the crisis all had senior positions and profit-sharing agreements. I proposed to Alexis on a camping trip in Big Bend. Nothing elaborate, just the 2 of us sitting by a fire under more stars than seemed possible, and me asking if she wanted to make this permanent. She said yes before I even finished the question. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family, no drama, no performance, just 2 people committing to build a life together. Dylan sent a wedding gift. A nice set of kitchen knives with a card that said congratulations. Wishing you both the best. No return address, No explanation. I almost threw it away, but Alexis convinced me to keep it. It's just knives, she said. And they're good knives. Don't let the past poison practical cutlery. She had a point. We used them regularly. They were excellent knives. Life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Work was busy but not consuming. My marriage was strong. The company was profitable and growing at a pace we could manage. I'd reconnected with my family, the ones who'd been supportive during the crisis and the ones who'd been absent but were trying now. Not everyone gets a redemption arc, but some do, and I'd learned to accept imperfect attempts at making things right. On the 4th anniversary of that text from Vanessa, I was sitting in my office going through quarterly reports when Sarah knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always." "What's up?" She sat down across from me, that same expression she'd had years ago when she first told me about Dylan's suspicious behavior. "I got a call from a recruiter. Big firm in San Francisco, offering me a VP position with significant equity." My stomach dropped. "Are you taking it?" "I don't know. That's why I'm talking to you first. The opportunity is incredible. But I also helped build this place. It feels wrong to leave." I took a breath, pushed down the immediate panic response. "Sarah, you've been with me since the beginning. You stuck around when you had every reason to leave. You helped save this company and then helped it grow. If you want to take this opportunity, I'll be sad to see you go, but I won't stand in your way." "You mean that?" "I mean it. But I'm also going to make a counter offer, because I'd really prefer you stay." We spent the next hour talking through what it would take to keep her. More equity, a clearer path to eventual partnership, flexibility to work remotely part-time so she could travel more. By the end of the conversation, we'd sketched out a plan that excited both of us. She turned down the San Francisco offer and we restructured her role to give her more autonomy and ownership. After she left, I sat there thinking about how different that conversation would have gone 4 years ago. How I would have panicked, maybe tried to guilt her into staying, definitely would have taken it personally. Now I understood that good people having options was a sign of success, not betrayal. The goal wasn't to trap people. It was to build something worth staying for. That night, I told Alexis about the Sarah situation over dinner. "You handled that well," she said. "I handled it like someone who learned the hard way that you can't control people. You can only create conditions where they want to stay. That's very wise and well-adjusted of you." "I have my moments." She smiled. "You know what I think the real victory is? Not the company's success or the money or any of that. It's that you became someone who doesn't need external validation to know your own worth. That's the thing Vanessa could never take from you, even when she tried." I thought about that. About the version of myself from 4 years ago, devastated and alone in a garage, reading a text that felt like the final proof of his inadequacy. About how that moment had felt like an ending when it was actually a beginning. About how the worst thing that happened to me had forced me to become someone stronger, clearer, more certain of what mattered. "I should send her a thank you card," I said, joking. "Absolutely not. Don't be weird." We laughed. Finished dinner. Cleaned up together. Went to bed in the home we'd built, in the life we'd chosen, surrounded by the quiet evidence of things that lasted. The text still existed somewhere in archived messages, those 8 words that had cut so deep, "Found someone better." "You're pathetic." But they'd lost their power. They were just pixels now, an artifact of who I used to be and who she used to be, frozen in a moment that no longer defined either of us. I had found something better too. Not someone, though my marriage was better than anything I'd had with Vanessa. I'd found the version of myself that could look at betrayal and see opportunity. That could take the worst thing someone said about me and use it as fuel to become someone who didn't need their approval. That garage full of rust and regret, that inheritance of nothing that became everything, it didn't exist in my story. What I had instead was a text message and a betrayal and a choice to either let it destroy me or let it rebuild me into something stronger. I chose stronger. And that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.